Hello and welcome back to the Edge of the Box podcast, a podcast by WhoScored.com. I'm your host, Dan Bardell, joined by Ben from WhoScored and Jonathan Wilson, who is just celebrating Sunderland's Cup exit. We're not here to talk about the Cup, though. We're here to talk about the Premier League. And weirdly, we're going to start with Leeds against Manchester United because Manchester United played Leeds last night. 2-2, entertaining game. Leeds going 2 up, but Manchester United doing a bit of an Alex Ferguson and coming back and getting back to 2-2. Jonathan, Leeds looking for a new manager, though, although there was signs of recovery last night, but they're going to hire a new manager.
Yeah, I mean, to an extent, last night's game was very similar to the last sort of 3 or 4 months, that they played pretty well and they didn't win the game.
Yeah.
And they'd probably be a bit frustrated not to have taken more from the game. And, we were discussing this last week, weren't we? That it's very hard to know what went wrong under Jesse Marsch. That as an outsider, largely dealing in highlights, but occasionally seeing them live or seeing full games, they seem to be playing pretty well, but they just weren't getting enough points.
Can't score. I think that was the main issue. They just couldn't put the ball in the back of the net. That was the problem against Forest.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a classic problem in both boxes because I think they've let in 26 goals now this season, which is the 4th worst record in the league. So it's partly not taking chances, it's partly letting in too many goals. And obviously, they're both quite bad things and quite fundamental things. So I don't know if it's just a slight lack of confidence, whether it's something with process coaches that they get the process right, but actually you need an end to the process. I think, and this was true under Bielsa as well, that the injury to Bamford has really hampered them because he on form is a very good striker, but he obviously hasn't been scoring recently. Hasn't been scoring many recently. Rodrigo being injured hasn't helped. I mean, if you are Leeds, I think that the timing looks a bit odd coming just after the end of the transfer window, and that's obviously was never part of the plan. But equally, I do get from the owner's point of view, you're looking at the table, you're looking at other teams in the table, and you think, well, Bournemouth and Southampton probably in trouble, but there's not actually another bad side down there. Everton may be starting to recover, West Ham showing signs of recovery, Wolves showing signs of recovery. So Leeds have to do something. They can't just let this drift. Forest playing really well at the minute. So I have sympathy for Jesse Marsch because, as I say, I think they played pretty well in quite a lot of games, but they weren't getting results, and I get that you need to arrest that.
Yeah, Ben, almost Everton getting Sean Dyche in and beating Arsenal and giving them a bit of a lift and a bounce, and then the following day Leeds losing to a team that you'd expect to be down in the battle with them in terms of Nottingham Forest. I think those two things combined, losing that game, Sean Dyche coming in, and as I say, Everton looking like they might recover, making a change. I feel like the hand was forced a little bit. I liked Jesse Marsch in terms of I liked the way Leeds played. I liked that they had an identity. I thought they were unlucky in a lot of games, and it's not his fault if the strikers can't put the ball in the back of the net. But the results had not been good enough. But all those things I've just spoken about, they probably all came together, and that's why he's got the sack.
Yeah, and Jonathan makes a good point in that there's signs of recovery for Everton and Wolves. Both of them changed manager in the last sort of 3 months or so. So Leeds have probably seen that and thought, well, we need to do the same now just because we're not going the right direction under Marsch. I mean, last night extended their winless run to eight matches, which is the second longest, and matched their 8-game winless run from earlier in the season. So it's just a combination of bad luck for Marsch. You can't put the ball in the back of the net. You go 1-0 down and then you sort of fold. Counterintuitively, that's what Marsch was there to sort out. If you go 1-0 down, you need to have that resolve to haul yourself back into the game. And they were unlucky against Forest. They were up against an inspired Keylor Navas on his debut. But it is bad luck as well on their part, especially losing Rodrigo to injury, Bamford having his time on the sidelines. And unfortunately, it cost Marsch's job.
It was different problems last night, obviously going 2-0 up and then chucking it away, and Manchester United coming back into the game at 2-2. Jonathan, you touched on it that the timing was a little bit odd. Not only have they just brought in a load of players that pretty much fit a Jesse Marsch system, fit the Leeds ethos of the type of player they've been signing under Jesse Marsch, they also just brought in a new coach to assist him, who was felt very Red Bull centric as well with what they were doing. So they've made all these changes, and now there probably isn't another manager like that out there.
Yeah, I mean, particularly the American focus. You think that's backing for Marsh that getting his people for want of a better term. But I think it's an issue that if you're an owner, you see your club sliding, you see the results aren't getting better, whatever you might think of performances, and you think, right, we've got to do something. And in those cases, the easiest thing to do is always to change the manager. And Leeds may well have a bounce, and that it may be that's just a regression to the mean and would have happened under Marsh anyway. But I also think managers do get on these downward cycles where people just start to lose faith in them, and so it can look like an over easy solution to just make the sacrifice. But equally, sometimes when managers are on that drift and they can't stop things going wrong, sometimes you do just need somebody else to come in and reset everything, go back to basics, and start doing the simple things again. So, I mean, I'm sure they'll appoint a pressing coach. Arne Slot seems to be the person they're going after now, having not been able to get Areola from Rayo Vallecano. Slot plays that sort of front foot pressing football. I'm sure it's different to Marsh's because all these pressing coaches are slightly different.
Yeah.
The other name that's been linked is Marcelo Gallardo, who from River Plate, who's been brilliant at River. He's been linked with really big European clubs for 2 or 3 years now. He's won the Libertadores. He got them to another final. You think possibly that would be a step down for him, but then the money in the Premier League is so good. And it may be that Leeds, having been Bielsa's club, sort of gives them an extra glamour in an Argentinian context. I mean, if they could get Gallardo, I think that would be a brilliant appointment. But I think he is also quite a difficult man. Slot is, he's another shaven-headed, aggressive Dutchman, and I'm largely in favour of shaven-headed, aggressive Dutchman.
I mean, they definitely pressed less last night. I think that was part of the game plan against Manchester United. But what always struck me was the players were clearly playing for Jesse Marsh. They were always putting a shift in. That they hadn't thrown in the towel at all. I think the fans had gone. And when the fans had gone, that's always going to be a problem for a manager. One bright spark for Leeds, though, Ben, is Willie Gnonto. I'm struggling to say that name. The silent G, absolutely killing me. Where does he rank among the best youngsters in the Premier League? And good luck to you saying it.
I mean, if you look at just teenagers, he is in there just below Evan Ferguson. Of course, Evan Ferguson has only made 5 appearances for Brighton and unfortunately looks to be out for a bit on the sidelines. If you do sort of under the age of 20, he is still second. So, he is a very, very bright young talent for Leeds. He was obviously brought in to play, not even coming straight to the senior team, but then injuries forced Marsh's hand, and Leeds and Gnonto haven't really looked back since.
Yeah, he's been really good, Jonathan. He's an absolute live wire. I watched him at Villa Park recently live in the flesh, and absolutely rapid, very, very tricky. He's got good upper body strength. He's quite small, but he's got good upper body strength as well. He can beat men, but he can also fend them off. Some signing, really. It didn't cost a lot of money at all.
Well, you look at him now and you sort of think what we're into doing letting him go in, when was it, 2020? I think he went to Zurich. But I think you also see the benefit for a player of that age, and I guess players are different, but the fact he's played 60-odd games in the Swiss league, he's got that bit more experience. So there's end product there, as well as being very, technically very good. And he's now, he's Italy's youngest ever goal scorer. So, I think he's a really exciting talent, and he's one of those players who things have sort of worked out for him. That I don't think you'd plot a career progression to leave Inter, to go to Switzerland, to go to Leeds, but what it's meant is he's got experience at a decent level, but not an oppressive level with Zurich, and he's now getting regular games in the Premier League in a team where, in some sense, there's not a huge amount of pressure on him because he's sort of this kid who nobody knows about who's coming and is doing brilliantly, but nobody sort of expected him to sort of be the figure who keeps Leeds up. And he's quick, he's good on the ball, as you say, he's got that low centre of gravity plus sort of the upper body strength, and he scores. So I think really bright prospect.
I mean, this is true in football and in life. Sometimes you have to go backwards to go forwards. And that's definitely what Gnonto's done. I really am struggling with his name. That silent G is absolutely killing me. I can't work out what to do with it. I'm definitely not making it silent. The game last night, Jonathan, Manchester United obviously got a couple of big characters missing in midfield. Casemiro suspended, Eriksen out. So it was Fred and Sabitzer last night. Manchester United they lacked that player on the ball last night, didn't they? They lacked control of the game, in particular in the first half, and that's why Leeds probably ran right in that first half in terms of on the break as well, because Casemiro wasn't there to break it up. It was very difficult for Manchester United without those two players in midfield.
Yeah, I mean, I think Eriksen, they just don't have another player of that type, and I think it's the sort of player. There's not many of them about, and B, United haven't had one for a long time. Somebody who can dictate the play from deep. Sabitzer, I mean, I don't think he's quite in Eriksen's class, but he gives you a little bit of that. I think he's a good all-round. Yeah, Sabitzer's a good all-round player. I'm not quite sure why it didn't work out for him at Bayern, because he always impressed me when I saw him at Leipzig. So I think this is probably a good move for him. I think he's a useful player for United to have, because he can give you cover for Eriksen, for Casemiro, probably not quite the level of either, but he'll do a job. So I felt United generally last night, the first half, were slightly off. I think it'd be unfair to say it's specifically because of the middle of midfield. I thought I think it was just generally with United the last 2 or 3 weeks after that really good run they were on, there's just been a slight leveling off. But they came back strong in the second half, and I think probably deserved a draw in the end. And yeah, it's for them. It's a case of getting through the next couple of games till Casemiro's back. But when he is back, they've got that option alongside him of Sabitzer or Fred or McTominay, which is not a bad position to be in. I mean, they'd rather have Eriksen, but compared to where they were a year ago, that's a much healthier looking squad.
Yeah, and also Sancho was back last night. Ben got on the score sheet. I think McAleer will be a little bit disappointed with conceding that goal, but it was good to see him in the goals against Sancho, because he's kind of become a bit of a forgotten man. He was such a hot prospect. Everyone was so excited when he came to the Premier League. It's not really happened for him. But now Manchester United are better. You feel like he might become better as well?
Yeah, I think it depends kind of where Ten Hag looks to play him. I feel like he's probably better coming on from the left, but then you got Rashford out on the left. You do put Rashford up front, but then you got Weghorst and Martial. So it feels not quite crowbarring him into the side on the right, but then he's got Antony's play on the right. He's done well to hold that shape out on the right. He hasn't had that goal return, which many probably would have expected when they spent a huge sum of money on him in the summer. But then Antony is well drilled in what Ten Hag wants. He helps stretch opponents. He helps keep the shape in the final third, which in turn allows United to go on the front foot. But now he's got Sancho back. There are options out on the left and the right now. You've got Sabitzer there as well, as Jonathan mentioned, who is a bit of a jack of all trades, can play on the right or in the number 10 role to help with the sort of versatility of that attack line. Whether he's back, no one can really say, but you get that goal, you got the rapturous applause from the Old Trafford fans, and it's good to see him back, because as you say, he was a bit of a forgotten man.
Yeah, it might give him a boost just getting that goal. Everyone's doing that celebration at the moment as well. I need to find out why that is. Everyone seems to do that celebration when they score at the moment. Let's finish this game with predictions then, and Jonathan is league leader. I'll let you go first.
2-1 to Manchester United.
2-1 to Manchester United. Ben?
I'm going to give 2-2.
2-2, and I was going to go for 1-1. So that completes round 2 of Leeds against Manchester United. Next up, it's Liverpool v Everton. And Jonathan, are we looking at the end of days for Jurgen Klopp at Liverpool?
I think we might be. And I feel it's sort of come upon us suddenly that even 2 or 3 weeks ago, I sort of thought, it's probably a blip. He'll probably get out of this. But a combination of how badly Liverpool are playing, especially away from home, and his attitude makes me think, maybe this doesn't have a way back. And they got to the point with the squad where you look at it and you think, actually, there's not maybe Alisson, but apart from that, there's not a single bit of that squad that's working at the minute.
No.
And this happens when teams are out of form, and 2 or 3 changes and suddenly things can fall into place very quickly. But it feels a bit like United in the bad days or Chelsea in the bad days, where you're sort of looking across the pitch, you're thinking, well, if I was rebuilding, what do I keep? And there's not a lot there at the minute. You think, I definitely keep. I mean, Van Dijk, I know he's injured, but even before the injury, was having a poor season. Alexander-Arnold, clearly a great player, but he does a very specific job, and he needs others around him to allow him to do that job. And at the minute, they're not doing that. The midfield looks old. Thiago's defensive work recently has been dreadful. Salah's been out of form for a year now.
Yeah, I think no one's talking about that enough. I think the Liverpool fans would state that the rest of the team's letting Salah down.
Which may be the case.
Liverpool were good last season, weren't they? But since he's come back from the African Cup of Nations this time last year, he has been nowhere near the level that he was at previously.
Yeah, I mean, I remember. I don't remember it that well, but I did a piece towards the end of last season talking about this, and his touches in the box had plummeted. And my theory, compared to before the Cup of Nations, my theory was that Luis Diaz coming in, meaning Mane moving into the middle, meant that rather than having Firmino or Jota in the middle, dropping deep and creating space, he was sort of being forced to stay too wide, and that was reducing his effectiveness. I haven't looked at the stats for that this season, but the eye test would suggest he's not getting in the box as much. Now, whether that's because of Liverpool not having as much of the ball or not using the ball as intelligently, or because of the fact that a lot of games he's had Nunez playing there, who's a much more orthodox centre forward who's not dropping out the space. Whether Salah himself has sort of lost a bit of hunger, a bit of appetite, that maybe he sort of, there's obviously a time when he was contemplating a move, got his new contract, and maybe now he's thinking, maybe I should have done what Sadio Mane did and get out and have a new challenge and not be part of the decline of what had been a great team.
Yeah, and Gakpo's kind of walked into the fire, really. I felt a little bit sorry for him because he's walking into a team that's not functioning that great. This time last year, Diaz walked into a side that was going well, was fighting on all fronts. But for Gakpo, I think he's kind of playing up top, and Darwin Núñez is playing left-hand side, which, to be honest, Ben, I don't really get, because they brought Núñez in to be a centre-forward, not to play on the left-hand side. And I don't think he looks as comfortable out there because he's not a left-sided player. I'm not sure Gakpo looks as comfortable through the middle either. But on the subject of Salah, you've got some stats on since Gakpo's come in, Salah's stats.
Yeah, since so Gakpo's obviously started 2 league games this season, and you got to wonder whether Salah and Gakpo, obviously it takes a while to strike up the understanding with other teammates, especially when it comes in January. But Salah's 2 worst rated performances this season came against Wolves and Brighton, and they're in 3 of the games that Gakpo started. Now, obviously, there's a number of mitigating factors that come into why a player would underwhelm. But you kind of think that without Mane being on the left, and then they've been chopping change with Diaz, and as you said, Núñez going out on the left as well, it's whether Salah's sort of taking that time to adjust to a different type of forward playing through the middle or out on the left. Because the reason that Liverpool was so effective previously was, as Jonathan sort of mentioned, the touches in the opposition box had dropped. That'll be because Mane came through the middle, and I think they're really missing Firmino dropping deep to collect the ball, and that just opens up the space for the wide forwards to exploit. I think it's similar is happening with Salah now, in that Núñez likes to get in the box. Gakpo, his goal return in the Eredivisie, admittedly he is a different type of forward, but one who is also effective in the box to a different manner of Firmino. So it will take some time for them to adjust. I still think Liverpool were stupid not to sign a central midfielder in January and splash that one on Gakpo, but it will take, a good few months for them to get up to speed. But until then, it just seems as though Liverpool's front line's really suffering.
I mean, like Jonathan says, there's nothing that's functioning well in that Liverpool team at the moment, except for perhaps the goalkeeper is having a decent season. But Fabinho's the one for me, Jonathan. I know he's not playing at the moment. When he does play, it looks like he's running through treacle. He's not protecting the back four as well as he used to. He's not then giving those in front of him the platform to go forward and make things happen. And they're now at the point where a kid is playing over him, and he's getting praised for being Liverpool's best player. But I'm not having a go at him. I honestly just think he's doing the basics as well. I don't think he's doing anything special. He's literally just performing a basic role of a defensive midfielder, but yet he's their best player. Yeah,
I mean, what's happened to Fabinho, I don't know, but you're right. His form is. I mean, the 2 players. I mean, I'm sure Ben has stats on this, but I would suggest that the two players whose form has most declined since last season are Son, although he actually played pretty well the last week or two, and Fabinho. And whether that's a physical thing, whether something is going on off the pitch, whether it is other things around him on the pitch that I think that the structures of teams are very delicate, and a player can suddenly be put under different types of pressure by tiny things going wrong around him that we as lay people find it very hard to see, and maybe even professional coaches find very hard to see. But I think that's particularly true of a team like Liverpool, where it was so much about the system. And I think this is why these hard pressing teams, when it goes wrong, it can go badly wrong very quickly. This hasn't been a gradual decline. This has been a sudden decline. And that's because one player being off in one part of the pitch means that bit of a structure isn't working. That has a knock-on effect on the people around him. Maybe their confidence then starts to wane, or they start to sort of do jobs that they weren't having to do before because they're having to cover for people. And that has a knock-on effect elsewhere. And then suddenly that system, that incredibly sophisticated mechanism, which was what made them able to challenge City on a far smaller budget, suddenly that's going haywire all over the place. And it's very, very hard to put right, because it's a systemic failure that everything starts to go wrong initially because of one detail, but then the rot spreads. And then personalities get involved. And I think this is a thing that is often sort of overlooked, that tactics and emotions are interlocked. They're not discrete things. And Klopp was seen as this sort of great all-seeing figure who got everybody whipped up and everybody really passionate, everybody believing in the club, and also put in place this mechanism, got people doing incredibly hard work and complicated work and focusing and concentrating and putting in the physical effort to make that system work. And now he looks a slightly isolated figure. He's started to snap at people in press conferences. Stories he gave him a dressing room are that he's not in a good mood in training, and people are starting to doubt him. And so the whole thing just spirals and gets worse and worse. And he has put this right before. Two seasons ago, they had a not dissimilar blip. So it's not completely impossible that this gets rectified. But as each week goes by, it looks harder and harder to put right.
Yeah, and Sean Dyche has come straight in at Everton and got 3 points, Jonathan, against Arsenal as well, who were going very, very well, as we all know. The question I've got here is Everton the perfect squad? Is that the perfect fit for Sean Dyche? But actually, I would go further than that and say, is Sean Dyche the perfect fit for Everton?
I mean, the obvious thing you'd say to that from a purely tactical point of view is they didn't play 4-4-2. So his Burnley sides pretty much always played 4-4-2. Well, Everton didn't against Arsenal. They played 4-5-1, and the midfield three were all excellent. Gay had his best game since coming back. Onana, we'd seen flashes of him this season, but he was really good again. Doucouré, he'd been frozen out by Lampard, was excellent. And Onana and Doucouré especially, Gay to an extent as well. But Onana and Doucouré, they're not just hard-working, aggressive players who win the ball. They've got a bit of flair about them as well. Gay's a bit more withdrawn and sort of keep it safe, but the three of them together were excellent. And Odegaard had his least effective game, I think, probably of the season. That midfield that's been such a strength for Arsenal was overpowered. The first 20 minutes or so, Calvert-Lewin was a bit isolated, and you were sort of thinking, "No, I'm not really sure this is going to work. I think Arsenal will eventually just sort of grind them down." And then they switched over Iwobi and, remind me who the other white player was? McNeil. And for some reason, because they were then on the wrong sides, they were able to get closer to Calvert-Lewin. And that last hour of the game, I'd say Everton were comfortably the better side. And also, they just looked at danger from every corner. Simple corners, just swing it into the back post. And Ramsdale did not look comfortable at all under that, which I think could be a problem for Arsenal going forward. But also, it shows that you can cause a threat from set plays, not doing particularly complicated things. So I think maybe is this the perfect squad for Dyche? I'm sure there's improvements and changes he would make. Is Dyche perfect for this squad? I think maybe the timing is right, because I think there's been a previous times when Everton would have thought, hang on, Sean Dyche, we're better than that. Well, they're not. And they're obviously not now. They're bottom of the table when he came in, or maybe level on points stand at the bottom of the table. And I think the simplicity of his approach, clearing minds, getting down to just sort of playing basic football. And Everton's squad is better than the bottom three squad. So that simplicity of approach may be exactly what works. And I think I was at Goodison on Saturday, and the really striking thing was how straightforward it was. It wasn't that they were clinging on. I mean, nice lads. And Nketiah missed that chance. There was the clearance off the line from a Saka volley. Odegaard put one over in the second half. But it wasn't that Arsenal were absolutely battering them. Everton held on pretty comfortably, and it all seemed quite straightforward.
Yeah, I think why I'm saying Dyche feels a good fit for Everton, Ben, is because when were Everton last good under David Moyes? And that performance at the weekend felt like a bit like the David Moyes time, where a big team's gone to Goodison, and Everton have upset the apple cart.
Yeah, I think as well. I mean, you had Lampard sort of chopping and changing with the setup that he wanted, whether it be a 4-man or a 3-man defence. But yeah, Dyche not necessarily go back to basics, but he's brought in that 4-man back line. You could sort of tell straight away what defence that would be as soon as he came in. Minus, of course, maybe Patterson might have started had he been fit, but then he got the experience of Coleman down that right side. So it was fairly obvious they're going to go Coleman, Cody, Tarkowski, Michaelenko. And it's just kind of bringing that solid 4-man back line in that Dyche has worked with before with Burnley. And then, as Jonathan said, he got that, very good, hard-working midfielder, Gay, Doucouré, and Onana, whereas Onana and Doucouré do have that flair to get forward and help support the attack. And then you've got Calvert-Lewin up there as that sort of battering ram striker. I mean, there's a bit more to his game than just you put the ball on his head and he'll score. But it does seem as though this is a really good squad for Dyche. I think it's better that they went for Dyche than they would have done under Bielsa, because
definitely.
I mean, Bielsa I don't think would have worked at all. Dyche just seems a really good fit to haul them up the table and put the points on the board, which is just what they need to do.
Yeah, well, Calvert-Lewin had a quarter of his whole season shots on Saturday. Had 4 of his. No, is that right? I've done that math right. I have done that math right. 4 of his 16 shots this season came against Arsenal, so more involved in the game, which is what they want as well. And Jonathan's right. Not many teams will want to come up against that midfield at Goodison Park. I said that's a difficult, tough midfield to play against, I would say, because there's a lot in there in terms of energy, bite, and also Onana at times was up alongside Calvert-Lewin, making it a 4-4-2 at times, and with his height and presence, and Doucouré coming from deep into the box as well. Everton were a threat from crosses, and they deserve to win the game. Combined 11 time now. I'll come to you first for yours, Jonathan. What's the spread?
What is the spread? I find this really difficult because
it's not an ideal one, is it?
It's like, how far back am I meant to be going when judging form? But I guess if I'm picking a game for this weekend, if I'm picking a team for a game this weekend, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. I've got 6 Everton, 5 Liverpool. That's large as ever. I'm picking in units.
Do you think a week ago you'd have had 6 Everton, 5 Liverpool?
No, absolutely not.
Just you've been heavily influenced by the weekend's proceedings.
Well, I guess they were much better on Saturday.
Yeah,
I mean, they were hopeless under Lampard and they're quite good under Dyche. So
that's fair. I'm presuming Sean Dyche is going to be the manager of your team rather than Jurgen Klopp then.
Yeah, at the minute, yeah.
Yeah, okay, interesting. Ben, what's the Who Scored spread?
So we kind of did it just to see more out of intrigue. And we do have Liverpool's the dominant side with 7 players to Everton's 4. We've gone for a 4-3-3 with Alisson in goal, Alexander-Arnold, Gomez, Tarkowski and Robertson at the back. Midfield 3 of Iwobi, Onana and Thiago, and Salah and Nunez and Gray up front.
Okay. I'm not even sure what I make of it, in all honesty. I can't tell you whether it's good. I can't tell you whether it's bad. I just don't know what I make of that at all. Jonathan, what's your team?
I mean, basically, it's the wings are Liverpool, the goalkeeper's Liverpool, and the middle's Everton. So Alisson, Alexander-Arnold, Cody, Tarkowski, Robertson, Gay, Onana, Doucouré as a midfield 3. Then Salah with a massive question mark. Basically, if he hasn't done anything in the first 20 minutes, he's coming off. Calvert-Lewin and Nunez.
Interesting.
I think Nunez can do a job coming off the left.
I just don't like it. I don't think it looks comfortable. People talk about the eye test when they're watching football. To me, it just looks awkward. Him out on the left.
I think he's just an awkward player, though. And the thing is, he would work hard.
Oh yeah, I'm not disputing his work
and
rate.
He would bring the mate, which I quite like. So
he'd bring the what? I don't even know what that means.
The mate, the Uruguayan tea. You must have seen it. They're good with the bombisha, the silver straw.
I don't know what bombisha means. You literally, it's like talking a different language. Like you're talking in Uruguayan to me.
Well, so Argentina and Uruguay, they've got this obsession with mate. So it's this sort of very ritualistic things. You have a gourd, it would be a hollowed out squash or something originally, and then they put yerba mate, the bitter green leaves, hot water. You put the silver straw in the bombisha.
That's just a funny drink that they all walk around with.
Yeah, and then you pass it around the circle, and everybody has a suck from the straw, and you put more water on. Okay. And Nunez would bring that, and I think it's a good thing for team bonding. A lot of footballers not from the Rio Platense area are getting into it now.
I've seen a few Villa players doing it.
Yeah,
I was very, very.
It's a very nice sort of ritual thing, kind of. If you don't want to be sort of drinking kind of huge amounts of coffee, you just you have that, and you have a little sip every 5 minutes, and it's got I don't know what it is, the stimulant in it, but it's a caffeine-like stimulant.
It's like the opposite of Jamie Vardy.
It's opposite of me. When you talk about matains, I thought you talk about paint. I really didn't know where we were going to talk. We're talking with that completely lost me. You will have seen the confusion on my face, and everyone who's watching.
Not for the first time.
Not for the first time. Will not be the last as well. That problem with that weather thing, didn't we? At one point when Martin was doing the podcast, where I didn't know what something was. I can't remember what it was now. Again, I've forgotten. You tried to blank to me that it was to do with the weather, but it was.
What was it? It was
the player was metronomic. That was it. Not metrodome. Metronomical. Yeah, I didn't know what that meant either. Maybe there'll be a segment every week where I get caught out by not knowing what something is, because that definitely happened then. I do know about Arsenal v Brentford, thankfully, so let's talk about that now.
Are we doing predictions?
Oh no, yeah, we are. I don't know how to do my own job. Let's go back. Let's do the predictions then. Thank you, Jonathan. I'll go first. I'm going to go for Liverpool 1, Everton 1. Ben?
I was going to do the same. 1-1.
1-1. Yeah. Jonathan?
1-1.
It's a full house of 1-1s. Let's look then at Arsenal v Brentford. Now, we've done the predictions. We have touched on Arsenal a little bit there, Jonathan, in the Everton segment. Their only previous Premier League defeat this season was followed up with the Brentford game, and they won that 3-0. Do you envisage them following it up this time with a win?
Yeah, probably, but there's definite question marks. I mean, partly because Brentford are playing so well. 9 unbeaten now. Defensively look very, very solid. I think they play the type of game that old Arsenal hated playing against. That the physicality, the capacity to go direct. I think Arsenal are a bit better at dealing with that this season, but you'll remember the opening game of the season last year. And also, I'm interested to see how Arsenal react to what happened last Saturday, because it wasn't like the defeated United, in that the defeated United, they could say, we had that goal ruled out for VAR. If that had gone the other way, maybe we would have won it. And we were on top, and then a couple of over-aggressive substitutions through the second half gave United the chance to counter-attack. So you could, if you were an Arsenal fan, you could portray that as being, we got a bit unlucky there. Whereas they weren't unlucky at Everton. They deservedly lost the game 1-0. They were very, very flat. And I think that the really big issue is Ramsdale from corners, because he looked so shaky, just balls dropped on the 6-yard box. And Brentford are very, very good from set plays. So, and they have big players who can attack that. And I think every time Arsenal concede a corner, that will be a source of threat for Brentford.
Yeah, you feel like Brentford may have watched that game with keen interest, like you say, and they are very good at set pieces. Ivan Toney, Pinnock, Ben Mee's good from a set piece as well. So Arsenal have really got to be on that at the weekend. This is a real tough one. Not an ideal game, is it, for them, Ben? Because they're not used to losing this season, so they're not used to having to bounce back. And I would say Brentford are one of the more teams to bounce back again, because Brentford are very good at what they do. They're very well drilled and very organised, but they're also a threat going forward.
I think the issue as well was when they did play them last season. I mean, Arsenal responded excellently. That was Brentford's only home defeat in the league this season, was that Arsenal defeat. Away from home, Brentford have only won twice. Admittedly, one of those was at Man City, but it is a very difficult game for Arsenal to navigate, as Jonathan pointed out, and yourself as well, Dan. They're just going to, try and get the ball to Tony, try and disrupt that rhythm in the back line, and look for the knockdowns for the likes of Mbeumo and is it Wissa who play on the left? I imagine
he played at the last game. He definitely played.
So
you feel they'd go with that front three against Arsenal at the moment because why not? Why not have a go? Brentford are absolutely flying. They're top 6 at the moment. Brentford, I think they might be. They're absolutely flying, riding the crest of a wave at the moment. He's done a brilliant job there to Thomas Frank. And when I watch Brentford, Jonathan, that's one of the things that goes. It's almost missed is the goalkeeper's so good with the ball at his feet that they can just, when they need to, just go long to Tony. He finds Tony in just the perfect manner. The weight of the pass, the pace on the distribution from the goalkeeper always finds Tony. And Tony will win headers and win flick-ons for Mbeumo and Visa if he plays as well. So Arsenal are going to have to be on their guard. And that feels like the kind of thing Arsenal may not deal brilliantly with, even though they are more resilient than they were previously.
Yeah, I mean, particularly if doubts have been awakened by the way Calvert-Lewin played really well against them, it got knockdowns and got shots. I don't know, it could go. The thing Alex Ferguson always said was, it's not the defeat, it's how you react to the defeat. And if they come back and win this comfortably 2-0 and go on, win 2 or 3 in a row, and obviously they've got the City game coming up, which is massive. Say they won this and took even a point off from the City game, you'd say, well, it's fine. It doesn't matter that they lost that game. In a perverse way, you can say they came out of the weekend stronger than they went into it because they have the same lead that they had before, but there's one fewer game to play. So the fact that I mean, I guess you'd say playing away at Everton on paper, maybe not in fact, but on paper, is an easier game than playing away at Spurs, which the same game that City had. But fundamentally, they're one step closer to the finish line, and they have the same lead. I think had that lead been down to 2 points, even if they had even though they'd had a game in hand, then there might have been a bit more anxiety. But they can still afford to lose 2 games to City, and they can still, and it's still in their hands even after that. So it's a big test. And if they don't win this, then definitely there's questions asked about them temperamentally. But Brentford's away form is not that great. Arsenal's home form is great. And maybe this is just a chance to reset and sort of get focused on the basics again. And the thing I worry about Arsenal, I've sort of felt this for 2 or 3 weeks. It's almost like they've entered the run-in too early. We're doing it as well. We're talking about, the 5 points clear of the game in hand with 18 games to go. Well, that's absurd. You shouldn't be thinking, 16 wins and we've won the title. 16 wins is an awful lot. So I do worry that they might have got into that sort of highly stressed headspace too early, and then a defeat could knock them. But I think they will. I think they will be okay here.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Brentford's away form. It hasn't been great all season, in fairness, but the defence is looking pretty solid at the moment. They've only conceded 1 in their last 5 since Ethan Pinnock's kind of returned around that same time as well. So Brentford will be tough to break down. Let's have some score predictions then. It's your turn to go first, I believe, Ben.
Yeah, I think it'll be closer than the reverse fixture, but I do think Arsenal will nick it 2-1.
Arsenal 2-1. Jonathan?
2-0 Arsenal.
2-0 to Arsenal. I'm going to go 2-1 as well. Yeah, 2-1 to Arsenal. We finish then, as always, with the Just a Minute section. And remember, it is called Just a Minute for a reason. Jonathan, you're going to start with West Ham against Chelsea, a London derby.
Yeah, and 2 teams in slightly uncertain form. They're probably going in reverse directions. That West Ham, after a pretty rocky run, lost 5 games in a row in the league. They're now through to the 5th round of the Cup. They've last 4 games in the league. They've won 1 and drawn 2. But the 2 they drew were away at Leeds and Newcastle, both of which they probably think were certainly one at Newcastle. They think was a decent performance and a decent result. But there is a sense of things beginning to settle down, even though they are still only a point off the drop zone. A lot of injuries still. Zuma, Cornet, Kehrer all out. Doubt over Scamacca. Chelsea, I mean, who knows what's going on? Massive squad. Almost possible to predict their lineup, but Also a lot of injuries. Pulisic, Kante, Fofana, Kovacic all out. Broja a doubt. Zakaria and Mendy out. João Felix still suspended. It was 2-1 at Stamford Bridge, and I think Chelsea probably have just enough to win again, but probably only 1-0.
1-0 to Chelsea, Ben?
1-0.
1-0. I'm going to go for 2-0 to Chelsea. It feels like João Felix has been suspended forever. That game he got sent off feels like it was a real long time ago.
I think he's back for this one. This is
is he? Oh, sorry.
Sorry. Jonathan feeding me false information. That's why. There we go, João Felix. It has felt like he's suspended forever, but he's back for this one. Ben, Leicester v Spurs, the Ian Walker derby.
I like that one. Leicester ended a 5-game winless run at Aston Villa last weekend, as they ran out 4-2 winners at Villa Park, with debutant Tete in particular impressive for the Foxes. The Brazilian should keep a spot alongside James Maddison and Harvey Barnes support Kelechi Iheanacho, with Brendan Rodgers potentially going for an unchanged 11 here. Ryan Bertrand and James Justin remain sidelined for the Foxters, but Leicester's injury woes are easing, with Johnny Evans, Ricardo Pereira, Boubakary Soumare and Wilfred Ndidi potentially available in some capacity here. Leicester do have the second worst home record in the division and need to start making home advantage count more if they are to steer clear of danger. Tottenham have been rocked by the news that Hugo Lloris is out for at least 6 weeks owing to a knee injury sustained in the 1-0 win over Manchester City last week. And with Christian Romero suspended, change are needed at the back. Fraser Forster and Davinson Sanchez should start and go on defence respectively as a result. Pape Sarr and Lucas Moura are doubts, but Richarlison was fit enough for the bench last week. January arrivals Pedro Porro and Arnaud Danjuma are unlikely to start here, with the former having to wait a little longer for his debut given Emerson Royal's solid form of late. Spurs won this fixture last season in dramatic circumstances, but more comfortable afternoon is expected for the North London side, who will hope to have Antonio Conte back in the dugout, and I think Tottenham will win this one 3-1.
3-1. That was over a minute, by the way, Ben. A little warning for you there. We take 3-1 to Spurs?
Yeah.
I'm going to go for 1-1. I've got a lot of 1-1s today. Jonathan?
2-1 to Spurs.
2-1 to Spurs. Jonathan, next for you is Southampton against Wolves.
Which you'd say is probably a 6-pointer, but what I'm really looking forward to here is the new uncompromising Nathan Jones after his slightly bizarre post-match interviews last week. I think it was on the Football Cliches podcast, and they said and it was such a good description. Said that he felt like somebody who just committed a kidnap on Coronation Street, like a soap villain. He turned up the soap awards looking completely different, with a much more polite accent in a few months. But the problem is he just doesn't look or act like a Premier League manager. So the sense is he's out of his depth, and maybe that's totally unfair. But it's definitely coming to time. It's definitely coming to time to sort that out. They've lost 8 of the last 9 games in the league, although they are through the 5th round of the cup. Wolves are 5 points ahead of them. They've taken 10 points of 6 games under Lopetegui, who's made a big difference. They're 2 defeats in that time to the 2 Manchester clubs. Both clubs have a scattering of injuries, but I think Wolves will win this 1-0.
1-0 to Wolves. I'm going to go for 3-1 to Wolves. I don't think I've ever predicted Wolves to score 3 goals in my life. Ben?
2-0 to Wolves.
2-0 to Wolves. Right, that was I think I was well under a minute, that one, Jonathan.
Bang on a minute. I've got
was it bang on a minute?
Yeah, just despite your interruption, it was bang on.
I'm going to do things. I'm going to do things my way now, Jonathan. I'm not going to let interferences from outside come in and affect the way I do things. I'm very Nathan Jones nowadays. Fulham against Forest for that's a Stan Collymore derby.
Yeah, Fulham didn't quite do the double over Chelsea this season, but a 0-0 draw with their West London rivals means they have taken 4 points off the Blues. That being said, a stalemate at Stamford Bridge extended their winless run to 3 league matches, though narrow defeats to Tottenham and Newcastle isn't anything to really worry about. Marco Silva's side welcomed Nottingham Forest at Craven Cottage with just Niskins Cabano, got there in the end, injured. So it's likely that Silva names an unchanged 11 for the Saturday's welcome Forest after they suffered no further injury concerns in their 3-2 FA Cup win over Sunderland. Steve Cooper takes his men to the capital in the midst of a 5-game unbeaten run in the Premier League, winning 3 of those, including a 1-0 victory over old foes Leeds that cost Jesse Marsh's job. Forest have saved their best performances for the City ground. Cooper's side winning just once on the road in the league this term. Forest still have a number of absentees here, and this one comes too soon for January arrival John Joe Shelby. Dean Henderson is among those ruled out, though Keylor Navas put in a man-of-match display in his first foreign appearances. So the absence of unknown Henderson isn't a massive blow. However, I still think Fulham have enough to get the job done and that they will win 2-1.
2-1 to Fulham. I'm going to go for another 1-1. There's going to be a lot of 1-1s this weekend. Jonathan?
1-0 to Fulham.
1-0 to Fulham. Most of Ben's minute there was spent trying to say Niskins Cabana there. That was well done. Good effort. Palace against Brighton for you, Jonathan.
Brighton in great form. Sixth in the table, must be contemplating a first ever European campaign. They've won 5, drawn 1 of the last 6 in all competitions, and they haven't lost away since City beat them as far back ago as the 22nd of October. Palace, completely different. No win this year. They haven't won in 6 in all competitions. They're now only 6 points above the relegation zone. So you would be surprised if they got sucked into danger, but given how other teams at the bottom are beginning to improve, they do need a turnaround pretty quickly, and they'll be starting to look anxiously over their shoulders. This is obviously a derby, a slightly odd derby, and Palace are unbeaten in the last 6 games against Brighton, though they haven't actually met since January last year. So we got no previous game this season to go on. Zaha, Ward, MacArthur, Ferguson out, Anderson a doubt, Moda, Colwell out, and then a load of doubts, and McAllister suspended. 1-0 Brighton.
I'm going to go for 2-0 to Brighton. Ben?
1-0 Brighton.
1-0 to Brighton. Ben, your last one is Manchester City against Aston Villa.
Manchester City were unable to capitalise upon Arsenal's defeat at Everton last weekend as they slipped to a 1-0 loss at Tottenham. Some cracks have started to show for City in recent weeks. Pep Guardiola had overseen a run of 3 defeats in their last 6. Meanwhile, the club have been rocked by charges of financial fair play by the Premier League in what's likely to be a long-running saga off the pitch. On it, City do remain imperious at home. They failed to win only 2 of 18 matches at the Etihad Stadium this season, and have won each of the last 12 home league meetings with Sunday's opponents, Aston Villa. Foden is a doubt due to illness, but John Stones unlikely to return to action until next month. Having picked up 10 points from the previous 4 matches, Villa fell to a surprise 4-2 home defeat to relegation-threatened Leicester last weekend. On the road, they have won their last 3, beating Brighton, Tottenham, Southampton, and seen just the once in that run. And they did give City a scare in this fixture last season. Summer signing Diego Carlos is due back in training soon. They won't feature here, and nor will Bertrand Traore or Jed Steer. Emery does have options to tinker with his system and might be tempted to use a more defensive-minded setup to frustrate City at the Etihad Stadium. However, I do think City will get the job done against Villa and win 3-1.
Oh, do I do it? Do I do it or not? No. I'm going to go for Manchester City 3, Villa 1. Jonathan?
2-0 to City.
2-0 to City. Jonathan, your last game here is Bournemouth against Newcastle. Eddie Howe returning to his former team. Has he been back yet? Is this the first time he's been back? I felt like he perhaps didn't.
No, he went there in the Carabao Cup. Or they faced him in the Carabao Cup.
Exceptional knowledge to know that. Yeah, okay.
Bournemouth
obviously, I was going to say that in my minute.
I felt like you were about to jump in, Jonathan.
Yeah. They played him at home, so it's the first time he's going back.
Oh, so I was right. There we go. I was right. There we go. This is the new uncompromising Dan Bardell. This is what I do. Bournemouth v Newcastle, Jonathan.
Well, I'm sure Eddie Howe's in for a vicious reception from a Vitality. Bournemouth, though, they've got a haunted look at the minute. They've taken 1 point. They've drawn 1 and lost 7 of the last 8 games, all competitions. In the league, they've only taken 4 points from the last 11 games. And the big worry is they're just not scoring goals. 1 goal scored in their last 6. They probably would take some positives from the defeated Brighton, where they played pretty well before going down to Matoma's very late winner. Newcastle have still had only 1 defeat all season, but they have drawn 4 of the last 5, and there certainly was no title challenge from them now. Maybe getting the top 4 is looking a bit less likely than it was before. They too have struggled for goals, only 2 in the last 5 games, but they have only conceded 1 in that time. They've had 6 0-0s to see, but 3 of them have come in those last 5 games. Guimaraes suspended for them, Target and Kraft out, but I think they'll have just enough, and I've got them down to win this 1-0.
I'm going to go out there. I'm going to say Bournemouth are going to win 2-0 against Newcastle at the weekend. Ben?
Copying Jonathan, going for 1-0 to Newcastle.
1-0 to Newcastle. We've got a league table update for our predictions, Ben?
No, I haven't had a chance to do it.
Come on, Ben. I've been asking for weeks.
I know. I just haven't had the time to do it.
Be more Nathan Jones. Come on, we need to know.
I don't want to be more Nathan Jones.
Got to be more Nathan. Nathan would have got that. Would have got that done.
Straight up refuse to be more Nathan Jones.
He would 100% got that done, Nathan Jones. I don't think we'll be talking about Nathan Jones again, because I think he'll probably get the sack after this weekend.
We can get him on the show next week and he can sort out the league table.
I don't see him wanting to come on any form of podcast in defence, especially not this one after the way we've spoken about him.
But he probably can get a gig as a villain on Corrie. So, it's if nothing else, it's put him in the shop window.
He does look like he could be like Kevin Webster's brother. Long lost brother Kevin Webb comes back. It comes back onto the scene. Just walks into the Rovers' return. Hi, Kevin. I don't know what I was doing there. That wasn't a very good impression of Nathan Jones at all. But you know what I'm saying. It does look a bit.
Why would Kevin Webster's brother be Welsh?
I don't know, half brother.
Half brother.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah,
It could be. I mean, there's probably been sillier plots in Coronation Street over the years. I'm going to say, but this is one to keep an eye on. Nathan Jones in Coronation Street. That does us for this week's bizarre edition of Edge of the Box. Thanks ever so much for tuning in, and thanks to Ben and Jonathan for chatting Premier League with me. We will be back as always next week. If you subscribe to the channel with your post notifications on, you'll know exactly when that video is coming. Enjoy all the football at the weekend, and as ever, please stay safe.